This week we're going to be switching away from Code 12 and we're going to start using a package called JGrasp. And this is what's called an IDE, which is an integrated development environment. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to install Java and JGrasp. And if you click here, you'll see that there are instructions. It's very easy to do. Okay, then next you're going to want to get started with JGrasp. So a lot of the functions that we haven't had in Code 12, anything that started with CT, they're no longer going to be available to us. And instead of the start and update functions, we're going to start actually with a blank screen. And our first function is going to be called main. Also, when we print, since we were using CT to print, we no longer have that. And what we use instead in Java is called system.out.println. Now there's also a system.out.print. So without the ln, it keeps printing on the same line, right? Just like in CT println. And with the ln, it prints what you have there, the value, and then goes to the next line. So it's very similar. You just have to replace CT here with system.out. Okay, and the print line is the same. So once you start JGrasp, you need to, ignore any alerts that they give you. You might get some alerts, just ignore those. You're going to go to File, New, and Java because you want to open a Java program. And since it's an integrated development environment, it's going to have an editor in it, a compiler in it, and you can run your program right there. So everything is integrated together. So let me show you an example. So I'm taking this example here, this class my program. So we have everything's the same. We have a class. We call it by a name. The class has to start with a capital letter. And instead of that start, we're going to have a function called public static void main string args. Okay, every program starts with this. So just get used to putting that into your code. So basically it's the first function that's run in every Java program. So it's called main. Basically this is an array of strings that are arguments, so that if you wanted to run your program and have arguments that go into it when you run, you can do that. We're not going to have to worry about that. It's a void function, meaning it doesn't return anything. It's public, meaning anyone can call this function from outside of the class, and it's static, meaning it's not attached to any sort of object. And we're going to talk much more about static functions today and next week. And basically all this program does is print hello from Java. So I actually have, here is JGrasp. Here's what it looks like. So if I wanted to open a file, I could either go to File, Open, or I can click on the Open, or I can say File, New, and then I would say Java, and that would start a new program. Now notice I have these tabs down here. I actually have several programs open at once, so you can move back and forth from one basically class to another, because later on you'll be writing some programs that have different classes, and you can have them both up here and go back and forth. And you can move these around as well. So I can take this one and put it over here if I want. Okay, so here's the first program. So it's just like in the example. Okay, and what all that's going to do is print hello world. Now this is the editor, and this is where the output comes. So if I want to run the program, I have to first save it. So when you go to run a program, if you haven't saved it, it's going to tell you to save it. So you will save your program, and then you need to run it. So it's not like in Code 12 where as soon as you save it, it reruns. You actually have to do that in 2 different steps. So if I want to run the program, I find this little guy who's running right here, little red running guy, and I click on it, and down here I get my output. So my code was a little different. In the example, it said hello from Java. I had hello world, so it printed hello world. Now the next time I run it, it'll just continue with the output. I can scroll up and down here, but I can also clear my output by clicking on clear. So that clears it all again. If you have errors, so let's suppose I forget my semicolon there and I go to run it, I'm going to get an error. Okay, I'm going to, so then it tells me that there's an error. It says that there's a semicolon expected, and I need to figure out that my semicolon goes here. Okay, now we're not going to have quite as good error messages as we did in code 12, but it will tell you if you have syntax errors and usually tell you where they are. Remember that I want also conventions as to how your code looks. So I want brackets, curly brackets, to be on a line by themselves. Sometimes people put the opening curly bracket at the end of the previous line, and that's not how I want us to write our code. We have to put curly brackets on a single line by itself. Okay, so let's go back over here, and that pretty much covers everything in this part of the reading. Okay, the next one is using classes from the Java class library. So remember in code 12 we had some objects and things that came with the class, and one of them was a game object. The game object had variables associated with it. It was actually a whole class, so it had its variables and it had methods or functions that went with it, right? Well, we're no longer going to have the game object class, but Java comes with a whole bunch of classes already built in. Okay, so one example is a random class, or we've actually already seen a few classes. There's the string class, there's the math class. Okay, and in most of those classes, if we're going to use the class, we need to do what's called importing the class. So there's this class called random, which allows us to get random values, just like we had CT, random, int, and all those functions. So the first thing you would have to do is say import. This is before your class, import, and you put java.util.random. Okay? So java.util is one of the libraries, and random is one of the classes in that library. Then I would, here they want, you have your main, and then it says you need to create a new random object. So we saw this with game object, right? When we created a game object, we would make it either a circle or a rectangle. We were actually creating an object at the time for that variable that is an object to have space in memory. So what this does is the first thing I have to do is I declare a variable, and I have to say that it's a new variable of that class. Okay, that gives the compiler space in memory for anything it's going to need for this class, all the variables that are in the class that keep track of what the class is doing. So I declare it as rand, so my variable name is rand, and I say equals new random, and then notice just open close parentheses by themselves. You have seen the word new, the keyword new, before when we were creating arrays, right? So this is how you create an instance of a class. Okay, an instance of a class is an object. And then what this is doing is it's just going to call one of the methods that are associated with the random class, and the method is nextInt, and basically what that does is it gives us a new random integer that's between 0 and 10. Okay, so you don't have to put 2 values in here, you just put 1, and it will give you a random integer between 0 to 10. So let's look at another example here. Okay, so this one is going to use the random library. Okay, so we have to import the Java util random library so that we can use this random class. This class is called Hello World, and just so you know, the name of your file, the name of your Java program has to match what you call the class. So my program is called helloworld.java. So when I go to save it, it has to have the same name as the class. Okay, then I have a variable here called result that's a type double, and it's a global variable. It's a class variable for this Hello World class so that it can be used anywhere, and we have to say that it is static. The reason that we're saying that it's static is because we are going to have a static function down here that is going to use that variable, and if you have any static functions that use class variables, you need to make the class variables also static. Now, static again means that it's not associated with any part of the class, essentially. You don't have to create an object in order to use the function. It's just a function all by itself, so that's why we call it static, and it returns a double called average, and we have two values that go into that. Okay, so what we're going to do here is print hello world, and then we're going to declare a variable called av that's of type double, and what we do is we're going to call our average function here with two numbers, and that's going to then calculate the average of those two numbers here. And then we're going to print average is plus av. So just the same, you use the plus anytime you're going to put more than one value here. We have average is in double quotes, and it'll print that, and then it'll print the value of the variable av. Now I'm going to declare a random object. Okay, so I'm using the random class, so it's type random, and a variable is called rand, and I say equals new random, and then I can do things with it. I now can use the dot method to invoke any of the random class methods. So rand.nextInt, we did that here. I'm going to set that to a value because it returns an integer, so we need to do something with it. So I'm going to say int r equals rand next, and then I'm going to print the random value is r. So I can run this. Okay, down here you can see it printed hello world. It says the average is 34.9 and the random value is 95. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. When you create a variable that's of type of a class and you're calling the new, you're saying new and the name of the class, that is calling what's called the constructor. And basically the constructor just ensures that the variable is initialized to how you want the random class object to be initialized to, gives enough space in memory. Okay, then here's another example with static variables. Again, if you're going to use a static function, which is a function that's not associated with an object of the class, then you have to declare it static. And if you're going to use any class variables, global variables in that function, they have to also be declared static. And remember, if we want to declare this as a constant, we would make it final, right? We could say static final int my constant equals 10 if we're never going to change it. Okay, so hopefully that will give you a good idea of how we're going to write programs in JGrasp. Make sure I don't. There is one other example I have here. It's the string formatting demo. Okay, so when you print out values, if it's a double, then you have a lot of places after the decimal point that might get printed. Okay, so if I have this value d that's a double and I divide 2 divided by 3.0, and remember I have to say 3.0 so that we don't have that integer division issue, and then I go to print d, what it's going to print is 0.666666666. Now maybe I don't want that. Maybe what I want to do is round d to 2 decimal places. So all I have to do is I can format this. Now I don't have to do this in 2 steps. I can just say system out print line and then put this here, your cost is, and this percent dot 2f dollars is what will format the value that you have here. Here we're going to create a string. Okay, string.format. We're going to say your cost is percent 0.2f dollars, comma d. So that's going to take the value of d and it's going to format it so that it has 2 places after the decimal point. And the f just means it's a floating point number. The percent 0.2 means we want 2 places. And then we print the string, and what happens? So the first print, when we just printed the value by itself, we got all the 0.66666. And the second time, when we printed the value, we got 2 decimal places after the value. So you're going to have a programming assignment where you're going to print numbers, and I would like you, if you can figure it out, hopefully you can, to print your numbers using this format. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to write a program, okay, that, here's the problem. You and 9 friends, so 10 people total, are going to go to lunch, and you agree that anyone who orders only a drink will get it for free, and the remaining people will split the total bill evenly between them. So you have 10 people, and if 2 people only order a drink, then they don't have to pay for that drink. Now the other 8 people are going to then split the entire bill, and that's going to have to include the drinks, the cost of the drinks, okay? But it's only going to be split between the 8 people who didn't just have drinks. So it's going to tell you to create a blank Java file and to name it with your last name. So your class is going to be your last name and a 10, okay, for program 10. You're going to import the random class, the random library. You're going to put the standard main function in there, and the first thing I want you to do is print program 10. So you're going to practice with systemout.println, and then you're going to declare an integer called numPeople that's going to be set to 10, and then please use that in the rest of your code. So instead of using the number 10, use this constant that's going to be numPeople. So you'll have to declare that as, you might have to declare that as static. Okay, you can also declare it as final. Okay, so you want it to be static, and you could make it final. Declare an array of double named amounts that can hold numPeople elements. So you should be able to do that. We've declared arrays before. Make a string array that has names of friends, and you can pick the names and initialize it with those names. So pick 10 names and put them in your string array. Use the random class to get a value. So random goes from 0 to n-1. Oh, it's n-1. So if you put 100 in here, it's going to go from 0 to 99. So you'll figure out the amounts that you're going to want. You're going to, it's saying that the values are $8.50 to $24.99. So what you're going to have to do is figure out what would be the equivalent 0 value for $8.50, And what would be the equivalent top value for $24.99? You're going to have to do a little bit of math because this goes from 0 to n-1, but we're going from $8.50 to $24.99. So here's a hint. Convert everything to cents, and then you'll want to do some subtraction, and then you'll convert it back. Okay? So then use nextInt to get the next random value for each person in the array that is going to, what their meal is going to cost. Okay, and then pick two random, well, now you're going to pick two random people to give them just a drink. So you'll use nextInt as the index into the array for two people to give them a drink, so you'll change their cost to $1.75. And then you're going to print each of the meals, and notice I am printing them as dollars and cents, so I am using the functionality to format those numbers. Okay. Then what you're going to do is you're going to calculate the total bill. Okay, you should know how to do that. You add it all up, and you're going to calculate tax and tip. And then I want you to print the total, print the tax, print the tip. Okay, and also add those to something that's going to keep track of the total bill. And then you're going to write a function. So now this is going to be a function that does the per person cost. It's going to you're going to pass total bill to it, and it's going to return the per person cost. Okay, so this function needs to be static because you're going to use this num people variable. So here is another, just to remind you of how you can print. So in this case, we're just printing. So you would put double quotes, you would put the text that you want to be printed with the formatting here, and then a comma, and then the value that you're printing. This is actually using something called printf. So it's system.out. Instead of print line, it's printf, meaning printing a floating point number. What the \n does is it prints it and then puts it on a new line. So since we're not using print line here, we're using printf, we can add a new line in there with \n. So this is going to say pi is here 3.14, and then go to the next line. So that wasn't in the example I just saw you, but this is another, I just showed you, but this is another way that you can print that floating point number, and use this to print your values for how much each person's meal is, and then later you're going to print what each person owes, and then if the person got a free drink, you're going to say so-and-so got a free drink. So hopefully this is not going to be too difficult, and this all makes sense, and it's just writing code similar to what you've already done, but you're going to be doing it in JGrasp. If you have questions, please let me know. I'm always available via email, and remember, I also have my office hours on Thursdays, and if you would like to have a Zoom meeting with me at another time, let me know and we can arrange that as well. So have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week.